Today on the podcast, we have producer, director, and writer Dean Jones with us. Dean, you want to just share a little bit about yourself and what you do, and we'll go from there.
Hello, you guys. Thanks for having me on the show. This is terrific. I didn't know that something like this existed in North Carolina. I see this a lot in L.A. I'm a native of North Carolina, as you know, and I grew up in Alamance County, in the southern end of the county, in a small mill village, and was introduced to the film business when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
Through Dick Clark, believe it or not.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'll tell you this story.
Yeah.
So I was 7 years old. I was second grade, and I'm sitting in. We had a break session where you had to get your milk and cookie, and then you take a nap afterwards. You start begin classes again. So we were in morning break, and my teacher comes up. Your parents are here to pick you up. I was like, oh no, what did I do? I'm thinking I'm always in trouble. No, it wasn't that I was always in trouble. I felt like I were in trouble, because it sounded serious. And they took me out of school, and I thought something had happened to someone. And they said, oh, we're going to Ramseur. They're shooting a movie in Ramseur. I said, oh my goodness. So I was all excited. So we drove to Ramseur, and it was a huge production crew from L.A., Hollywood.
Wow.
And there was Dick Clark. He was directing and starring in his own movie. At that time, it was like 67, 68. Bonnie and Clyde had come out. Okay, big hit, Oscar-winning movie. And so I guess Dick Clark thought he was going to make his version. So he did. And he shot it in North Carolina. And I was 7, barricades up. I mean, they had big 5Ks, they had big film trucks. There were special effects guys running around with shotguns. There were makeup artists. They had the actor in the chairs, putting blood and bullet holes on his face. They had just blown up the safe in the country store. Incidentally, that place is still there.
Oh, wow.
In Ramseur. If you go there, the location hasn't changed at all.
And just for context for the audience, Ramseur is a tiny town with like 2 stoplights, and that's probably the biggest event that's ever happened there.
Biggest event. I intend to go back there someday and make another movie.
Okay.
That's my goal. But we were there all day long, and my dad had an 8mm movie camera, and he shot behind the scenes all day.
Oh, wow.
Including the makeup guys putting the bullet holes. And we still have that footage. But that was a big inspiration that day, watching all this stuff go down. And they were putting bullet holes with wax, what appeared to be wax and blood. And my dad was watching very closely. And, of course, when we got home, came Halloween, he was making bullet holes on himself and us for Halloween made of toilet bowl wax. The wax ring you put around your toilet bowl.
Yeah.
So he used that and with some red oil paint, and he made a very effective-looking bullet hole. And so that was my inspiration for, oh, my gosh, this is exciting. There's Dick Clark, and this is what I want to do. And I'm living in a country town in North Carolina with they don't have a school for this. They don't have any way of getting it. You were expected at 7 to go to high school, go to work in Burlington Industries, get a job, have some kids, live in a trailer park, that sort of thing. But I was thinking beyond that, at that age.
Yeah.
So I was very inspired by that. And when finally the movie came out, they did a screening in Ramseur, and I had not seen. They shot some scenes in a field. There's a love scene. Dick Clark and this actress had a love scene in the field, what's called Queen Anne's Lace, which is basically chigger patch, a chigger patch. And they didn't know because they were all from Hollywood.
Right.
Shooting in a chigger patch. So they're making out in a chigger patch. Of course, they all get bit with chiggers, and for like 3 weeks they couldn't work because they were just eat up with chigger bites.
Oh, that's funny.
But when the movie came out and they screened it in Greensboro here, I think it was Greensboro, the audience just roared with laughter throughout the whole shot, the whole scene. So, but it was interesting to watch. Waylon Jennings was in the picture. He had a brief part. I think he played the sheriff. But it was very interesting. And of course, after that, Halloween became, let's do something with makeup every Halloween. And that's kind of how my makeup skills began to, those skills.
Yeah.
And then I got to high school doing plays, and then I got to School of the Arts for a year. Then I got to UNCG, a BFA in acting with a concentration in acting, BFA in drama.
Okay.
So, and that was a great theater experience. My acting coach was from Actors Studio in New York. So he did something called method acting, which is believable acting,
Yeah,
James Dean, Al Pacino, all those guys studied, were actors, studio actors. Lee Strasberg was a teacher, and Bobby Lewis. But my teacher had studied with those guys who ran the school in New York, so he was an inspiration.
Yeah.
So that was the last 2 years of my university experience. Shortly after that, I got hired on an independent movie, shot in Kernersville with an old cowboy movie star named Lass LaRue.
Oh yeah.
And King of the Bullwhip. And before that, I did that movie. I was working as a stunt man in King's Dominion in the Western Stunt Show. So I was doing sword work and stunts and horse falls and high falls and hand-to-hand combat, rope swings and gunplay and doing all that business. So I had a whole summer of that before I went back. I came back to get my master's at UNCG, but it didn't finish because the program had changed from serious acting school to musical theater.
Right.
And my acting coach had left, and most of the people who were serious about acting had left. And so I was there for maybe 2 months. I took a leave when I got the job on this low-budget movie. I said, this is my chance. I'm taking it. Here I go. So I make that movie, and then cut to about 4 months later, the same producer makes another movie, and I get hired for that project. And then I get a call to go interview for Blue Velvet with David Lynch. And it just so happens I had a severed ear in my portfolio. So I got hired on Blue Velvet from that severed ear. From that point, I met some folks from L.A. One was David Lynch's assistant. And he said, boy, you got to come out to L.A. and go to work. That's where all the work is, you know. Everything's going on there.
Yeah.
He says, you're going to work maybe twice a year in North Carolina. And I took his advice, packed up, and moved to Venice Beach, California.
Nice. I like Venice.
Yep. So did I veer off from the question?
No,
you're good.
keep going.
Yeah.
This is long format, so
Yeah, the veer is
plenty of
appreciated.
time.
But so I wound up in Venice Beach in a little apartment on Venice Beach, right across from where Jim Morrison had lived, apparently. And went to John Wentworth, who was David's assistant, introduced me to some folks who ran a little place called New Horizon Studio, basically a lumber yard. It was a lumber yard. It was a dump on the corner of Main and 6th, right across from the Rose Cafe, which was right across from Oliver Stone's and Arnold Schwarzenegger's office.
Nice.
So that was my stomping grounds for about 3 years. Until the shooting. I'll tell you about that later.
And Venice was probably a lot cooler back then, too.
Oh, it's still kind of cool.
What year was that?
That was 86, 87.
Nice, yeah, that's cool.
That was there. I was at Roger Corman's place, and Roger was king of the B movies. You know, he got James Cameron to start. He got, you know, a lot of people to start. Giannis, who I was working with at the time, got his start working with, you know, he went to work for Spielberg. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But I got lots of stories. But I love living at Venice Beach because it felt like nobody had a job because everybody was always out. It's the strangest place. You live in a small town.
Still the strangest place.
Everybody disappears to go to their job for 8 hours, and then you see them at the end of the workday or at church. And but there, it's like everybody's out just having a good time. But it was great. Living in Venice was great. But worked for Roger for about 2.5, maybe 3 years. We were doing 2-3 movies a month. Budgets ranging from $70,000 to $700,000. Making movies in 9 days. I think the longest extent we had 17-day shoots was our longest shoot. He was
That's quick in the 80s, too.
Oh yeah, he was cranking them out. And what he was doing was basing. He was hearing about what was being made, like The Abyss was being made. He would do something called some other title that's similar to that, but he would do sort of not spin-offs, but he would do knockoffs of those movies on his budget because there were countries and domestic buyers who couldn't pay for The Abyss,
right?
You know, or a big movie like Titanic, and he would just make something like it that some, you know, a small country like India or Pakistan could afford to buy. Yeah, and he was able to fill that void. You know, he was smart. He was making $90 million a year. $90 million a year off those movies. And that's when the VOD market
to make some cheap movies
doing really well. And that's still the way to go. I mean, because of our equipment is scaled down to the size and the cameras are scaled down, you don't need as many crew people to manage it. So now you can just scale down everything. I'm shooting with an iPhone 11 now. I was using a Canon, somebody else's Canon, and we had 2 days of shooting on the music video, and we didn't have the budget to go into day 3 and day 4, and I knew I really wanted to get the shots I needed, so I whipped out my iPhone 11 because it had, wide angle lenses on it, and I could make adjustments, and it was in 4K, so it shot beautifully. I mean, you couldn't tell, it was seamless.
You can edit and post. Yeah.
And I felt like I was getting better shots because I could frame everything like I wanted it, compose a shot like I wanted it. I could move the camera where I wanted it. So now I bought a little handheld rig to put my iPhone in that'll hold it, so I'm not doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
And move around and get my shots with it. So I'm starting to pick up equipment and gear now for my own little company that we have called Atlantic Pacific Studios, which is in Burlington.